The wind screamed through the mountain pass like a wounded animal, hurling snow against the dark, weather-scarred logs of Clara Boone's cabin. She tightened her wool shawl around her shoulders and slowly stirred the pot of beans bubbling over the hearth. Another night alone. Another supper meant for one. Another evening spent listening to the storm instead of a human voice. 28 winters lay behind her, and 7 of them had passed within these walls. This cabin had become her whole world. Down in the valley, the people of Cedar Ridge had long ago made their judgment. Poor Clara Boone, they whispered when they thought she couldn't hear. Something's wrong with her. No man wants a woman who reads too much and speaks her mind. She had stopped attending church socials years ago, stopped hoping that the next newcomer might look past the rumors. The final blow had come when Agnes Whitlow, the sheriff's sharp-tongued sister-in-law, declared in the general store that Clara was cursed by God to live out her days alone. Mark my words. Clara spooned the last of the beans into her single tin bowl and sat at the rough wooden table her father, Silas Boone, had built before the fever claimed him. Outside, the storm worsened, shaking the shutters she had reinforced only days earlier. Firelight flickered across the walls, revealing little more than a faded photograph of her parents and an old calendar from 1876, kept only for the picture of roses. She was halfway through her meal when she heard it. A sound that did not belong to the storm. A steady, deliberate knock at the door. Clara froze, her spoon suspended mid-air. No one climbed the mountain in weather like this. Her nearest neighbor, Hank Whitman, lived miles down the trail and would never risk a blizzard. Her rifle rested on pegs above the mantel. She rose slowly and took it down. The knock came again, harder now. "Who's there?" she called, forcing her voice steady. "Please." The word came thick with an accent, barely audible above the wind. "My father's sick. May we stay one night?" Clara's fingers tightened around the rifle. She knew that accent. She had heard it before from Apache traders passing through town. The warnings of Cedar Ridge echoed in her mind. Never trust an Apache. They smile while they plan to steal everything you own. Yet something in that voice, desperation bound with quiet dignity, made her hesitate. She moved to the small window and scraped frost from the glass. Through the swirling snow stood 2 figures, one tall and broad-shouldered, holding up the other who sagged against him. "Just one night," the voice said again. "I give you my word." His word meant nothing to Cedar Ridge. But Clara Boone was no longer Cedar Ridge's woman. She was the one they had cast out, labeled unfit for decent society. Who was she to judge another outcast? She lifted the heavy bar and cracked the door open, rifle still raised. The wind lunged inside, flinging snow across the floor. The man before her was enormous. Well over 6 feet, shoulders filling the doorway. Ice clung to his long black hair. His dark eyes met hers without fear, even with a rifle aimed at his chest. But it was the frail figure he supported that made Clara lower her weapon. The old man was Apache, his face gray with exhaustion, breath shallow and uneven. Snow had settled deep in the lines of his skin, making him look like something out of an old legend. "Bring him inside," Clara heard herself say. The younger man's eyes widened, surprised by her quick decision. He guided his father in with practiced care while Clara shut and barred the door against the storm. "By the fire," she said, already clearing dried herbs from the chair closest to the hearth. The old man sank down with a soft groan. His son knelt beside him, speaking rapidly in Apache. Clara caught only fragments, words she recognized but could not fully grasp. "Thank you," the younger man said at last, turning toward her. In the firelight, She saw his sharp features, the scar cutting from brow to cheekbone. His clothing was a blend of two worlds: leather leggings, a worn wool coat, boots cracked but well kept. "He needs warmth," Clara said, her nerves giving way to practicality. "Those wet clothes will kill him faster than sickness. Can you help him change? I have my father's old things." The man gave a brief nod. "My name is Chaitin," he said, the English sound heavy on his tongue. "My father is Tahu." "Clara Boone?" she answered out of habit, then felt faintly foolish. Names felt small in a moment like this. Still, she moved quickly to the wooden trunk at the foot of her bed and pulled out her father's clothing: a flannel shirt, thick wool trousers, and heavy socks. They would never fit Chaitin, but they might serve his father. She added the extra quilt her mother, Edna Boone, had sewn years ago, the wedding ring pattern that once mocked her loneliness. When Clara returned, Chaitin had already stripped away his father's soaked outer layers and wrapped him in his own coat. The old man's eyes were shut, his lips moving faintly, caught somewhere between prayer and fevered dreams. "Is there a doctor in the town below?" Chaitin asked as he eased his father into the dry clothes. Clara shook her head. "Doc Morrison died last winter." She hesitated. "There's a man who pulls teeth and sets bones, but—" She let the words fall away. Eli Turner would never climb the mountain for an Apache, especially not in a storm like this. Chaitin's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He finished dressing his father and tucked the quilt around him, then stepped back. Without his coat, it was clear his own clothes were soaked through. He made no complaint, only moved closer to the fire, holding his hands out to the heat. "You need dry clothes too," Clara said. "You'll freeze." "I am fine." "No, you're not." The firmness in her own voice surprised her. "My father was a tall man. His clothes might fit you well enough for now." They stood facing each other across the narrow cabin, firelight crackling between them. Clara was painfully aware that she was alone with two strangers, one of them young and strong enough to overpower her without effort. Yet something in Chaitin's eyes held her trust: restraint, pride, and a quiet awareness that matched her own. "Thank you," he said again, and this time the words carried weight. She brought more clothing, then turned her back while he changed, focusing instead on heating water for tea. Her hands trembled slightly as she measured out the precious leaves. When had she last had visitors? Real ones, not Hank Whitman stopping by out of duty or a peddler hoping to cheat her. "Your father," Chaitin said suddenly. "He has been gone 5 years?" "Yes," Clara replied without turning. "My mother died 2 years before that. You have lived alone since." She could feel his gaze on her back, sense his quiet confusion. A white woman alone in the mountains was nearly as rare as an Apache seeking shelter from one. "The people in town," she continued, unsure why she felt compelled to explain, "they think a woman alone is unnatural. They have their reasons why no man has claimed me." "People always have reasons," Chaitin said softly. "That does not make them right." She turned then, startled by the understanding in his voice. He stood in her father's clothes now, the shirt pulled tight across his chest, the trousers a bit short but dry in the firelight. Shadows played over his face, making him look both dangerous and strangely exposed. Tahu stirred in the chair, murmuring in Apache. Chaitin knelt at once, pressing gentle fingers to his father's brow. "He burns with fever." "Do you have medicine?" he asked. Clara moved to the shelf of herbs. "Willow bark for the fever, echinacea for strength. I'm no healer, but I've learned what I can." She brewed the tea with practiced care, aware of Chaitin watching every movement. When it was ready, he helped his father drink, murmuring soft Apache words meant to soothe and steady. The old man swallowed a few sips before turning away. His eyes opened slowly, struggling to focus on Clara. "You are kind," he said in thickly accented English. "Not all white people are kind to Apache. Not all white people are kind to other whites either," Clara replied, thinking of Agnes Whitlow and her venomous tongue. A faint smile touched Tahu's weathered face. "This is true, my son. You did not wish to ask. Too much pride, like your mother." "Father should rest," Chaitin said quickly. "I will rest soon enough," Tahu replied. "But first I see a good woman, a strong woman, alone, but not broken." Heat rushed to Clara's cheeks. "You should save your strength, sir." The old man closed his eyes again, the smile lingering. Chaitin settled him more comfortably, then rose, his presence filling the small cabin. "We will leave when the storm breaks," he said. "I do not wish to bring you trouble." Clara glanced toward the door, where the wind still roared and snow pressed against the walls. "That won't be tonight," she said quietly. "And probably not tomorrow either. These mountain storms can last for days. Then we must pay." "With what?" Clara interrupted, surprising even herself. "You have nothing but the clothes you're wearing, and they're soaked," Clara Boone said. "You didn't insult me by offering payment for simple decency." For a heartbeat, something sharp flickered in Chaitin's eyes. Pride, anger, maybe both. Then his shoulders eased. "Then we will earn our place," he said quietly. "I am strong. I can work." "When the storm breaks," Clara replied. "For now, are you hungry? I have beans, cornbread, and some dried venison." "You give much to those who bring nothing." "I give what makes sense," Clara corrected. "A hungry man becomes desperate. I prefer my guests fed." This time she caught the hint of amusement in his dark gaze. He helped her prepare the meal, moving through the narrow space with a calm grace that seemed impossible for a man his size. They worked without speaking. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the cabin felt warm, and for the first time in years, not hollow. As they ate, Tahu dozed in the chair, murmuring now and then in Apache. Chaitin translated softly. Memories of Noma, worries about the weather, thanks for the fire. Clara felt the familiar knot of loneliness loosen, just slightly. "Why travel in a storm like this?" she asked at last. Chaitin's face darkened. "We were given no choice. Rafe Calder decided we were trouble. My father spoke against the cutting of rations. They gave us one day to leave," he went on. "In this weather, that is a death sentence. That is policy," he added bitterly. "Apache lives are worth less than the grain they withhold." Clara had heard stories of the reservations. Hearing the truth from a man forced to risk his father's life over stolen food made her stomach turn. "Where will you go?" "South," he said. "Perhaps Mexico. Anywhere they let us live without chains." He looked at his father with such tenderness that her chest ached. "He is old," Chaitin said. "He should not run like prey." "No one should," Clara answered softly. They finished eating in silence, the wind keening outside like a morning song. When Clara stood to clear the dishes, Chaitin rose as well. "You're a guest." "I am a man who must keep his hands moving," he said simply, or his thoughts turned dark. So they washed dishes together, an ordinary task that felt strangely intimate. Clara's chest tightened. When was the last time anyone had shared such small work with her? When was the last time she hadn't felt utterly alone? "It is strange," Chaitin said, as if reading her thoughts. "This morning, I believed we would die in the snow. Tonight, we are warm and fed. The world turns quickly." "Sometimes for the better," Clara said, and immediately felt heat rush to her face. These men would leave once the storm broke. She knew that. Solitude was her fate. Yet for tonight, sealed in by wind and snow, she allowed herself the comfort of pretending otherwise. Pretending that company was normal. Pretending that a man's presence didn't stir hopes she had buried long ago. A harsh cough shattered the moment. Chaitin was at Tahu's side instantly, pressing fingers to his brow. "The fever has worsened." Clara knelt beside them, noting the labored breaths and flushed skin. "We'll watch him in turns. You need rest." "I cannot." "You will," Clara said firmly. "You do him no good collapsing from exhaustion. I've sat with the sick before. I know how." Chaitin studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You are not what I expected of a white woman." "And you are not what the town taught me to believe about an Apache," she replied. "What did they teach you?" She hesitated, then chose honesty. "That you are thieves. That you'd kill me without a thought. And yet you opened your door." "Yes." "Why?" The question hung heavy between them. Clara looked at Tahu, sleeping fitfully, then back at Chaitin. "Because I know what it is to be judged without being known," she said. "Because I've heard enough cruelty to recognize real need." She paused, then finished quietly. "Because being alone doesn't mean being without compassion." Chaitin's expression softened. For a brief moment, the hardness carved into Chaitin's face softened. "Then our bad luck led us to good fortune," he said quietly. "The storm brought us to your door." As if in answer, the wind slammed against the shutters, rattling them hard enough to shake dust from the beams. The storm was not finished with them yet. Despite the fire's warmth, Clara Boone shivered. "I'll set up pallets by the hearth," she said, needing movement, needing purpose. "It's warmest there." Together, they laid bedding on the floor. Extra blankets and furs arranged into a passable nest for 2 men. Tahu woke just enough to be moved from the chair, his fever leaving him confused and weak. Chaitin spoke to him constantly in Apache, low and steady, a voice meant to anchor him. When the old man was settled, Chaitin leaned back on his heels. "I'll take the first watch." "No," Clara said. "You're worn through. Sleep a few hours. I'll wake you if anything changes." She expected protest. None came. Chaitin lay beside his father, one hand resting protectively on Tahu's arm. Within minutes, exhaustion pulled him under. Clara returned to her chair by the fire, drawing her shawl tight. The storm battered the cabin, but inside, a fragile calm took hold. She watched them sleep. Tahu's breathing strained but steady. Chaitin's rest alert even in slumber, the kind learned from years spent in dangerous places. Tomorrow would bring trouble. If the storm broke, they would need supplies. That meant town. That meant stares and whispers once people saw Apache men under her roof. Sheriff Cole Barrett would not stay silent. Agnes Whitlow would relish every word. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, Clara Boone was not alone. Tonight, her cabin shielded 3 souls from the storm. And for the first time in 7 long years, she felt the fragile stirrings of something she had thought lost forever. The fire snapped and sent sparks up the chimney. Outside, the wind sang its lonely song. Inside, warmed by flame and unexpected company, Clara kept watch through the endless winter night, her heart beating with a feeling dangerously close to hope. Gray light crept across the frost-laced windows at dawn, revealing a world buried under fresh snow. Clara stirred in her chair, her neck stiff from sleeping upright. The fire had burned low, but the cabin still held its heat. She had risen twice during the night to tend Tahu, easing willow bark tea between his cracked lips while Chayton slept the heavy sleep of the utterly spent. Now both men were awake. Tahu sat propped against the wall, color improved, though his breathing still labored. Chayton knelt beside him, speaking softly in Apache. When he noticed Clara watching, he rose with a smoothness that belied his size. "You should have woken me," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "You needed rest more than I did." She stood, working stiffness from her back. "How is he?" "Better, but weak. The fever broke near dawn." "That's good," Clara said. "Food will help?" She moved toward the cooking space, then hesitated. "I should warn you, my stores are plain. Cornmeal mush, molasses, maybe bacon if you eat pork." "We are grateful for anything," Chayton said. "May I help?" It felt strange to have a man in her kitchen again. Stranger still how careful he was not to crowd her in the narrow space. They worked side by side in quiet understanding. Chayton fed the fire while Clara stirred cornmeal and water in her heavy pot. The rhythm of it felt unfamiliar, and painfully familiar all at once. "You cook like someone practiced," Chayton observed. 7 years of it," Clara replied. "And before that, helping my mother, Edna Boone, since I could reach the stove." She added a precious pinch of salt. "A woman alone learns to do everything, or go without." "That is true for anyone alone," he said calmly, slicing bacon with her knife. "Man or woman." A cough interrupted them. Both turned as Tahu waved them away. "Do not fuss like hens," he said, his voice stronger than the night before. "I have lived through worse than a little cold." "A little cold that nearly killed you?" Chayton muttered in English, clearly meaning his father not to hear. "I speak English better than you think, my son," Tahu replied dryly. "And my ears still work, even if the rest of me complains." Clara hid a smile behind her hand. The bond between father and son, Chayton's fierce concern, Tahu's stubborn pride, tugged at memories of her own father's final months when Silas Boone had resisted her care with the same fierce will. They shared breakfast together. Tahu managed the table, though Chayton hovered close. The old man's appetite was encouraging. He finished his bowl of mush and even accepted a strip of bacon. Clara watched them, feeling the quiet, dangerous warmth of belonging settle into her chest. "Tell me about the town below," Tahu said, fixing Clara Boone with eyes far sharper than his weakened body suggested. "Do they welcome strangers?" Clara chose her words with care. "Cedar Ridge is set in its ways. Most folks came here running from something: the war, failed farms back east, broken promises out of California. They're protective of what they've managed to build." "Protective," Chayton said darkly. "I have seen that kind of protection. It often comes with guns and rope." "Not everyone is like that," Clara said, then wondered why she felt the need to defend people who had long pushed her aside. "My neighbor down the mountain, Hank Whitman, is a decent man. And May Lynn, who runs the laundry, she knows what it means to live as an outsider. But they're rare." "They are few," Tahu said, not asking. "Yes," Clara admitted softly. "Very few." The storm had eased during the night, though snow still drifted steadily from the sky. Chayton stepped to the door and studied the clouds through a narrow gap in the frame. Another day, he said after a moment. Maybe 2 before travel is safe. Then you're my guests until then, Clara replied firmly. And guests earn their keep around here. There's wood to split, repairs on the chicken coop, and a dozen small jobs I've been putting off. Relief flickered across Chayton's face. I work with my hands. Show me what needs doing. They spent the morning in steady labor. Chayton proved as capable as promised, securing loose boards on the chicken coop with little more than wire, a hammer, and ingenuity. Clara found herself stealing glances as he worked. The efficiency of his movements, the low, tuneless hum beneath his breath. Inside, Tahu sat propped near the fire and turned out to be excellent company. His English, though accented, was precise, and his dry humor caught Clara off guard. "You remind me of my wife," he said when she brought fresh tea. She had eyes that saw too much and a spine that refused to bend. "What happened to her?" Clara asked gently. "The soldiers came to our winter camp 5 years ago," Tahu said. "They ordered us to move to the agency. She said she was too old to live in a cage." His gaze drifted somewhere far beyond the cabin walls. "She walked into the storm that night. We found her in the spring, seated beneath her favorite pine, facing the mountains where she was born." Clara's throat tightened. "I'm sorry." "Do not be," Tahu replied. "She died free. That is more than most can say now." He studied Clara closely. "But you understand cages, even the kind without bars." Before Clara could answer, Chayton returned, shaking snow from his hair. "The coop is secure. Your hens seem suspicious of the improvements." "They're suspicious of everything," Clara said, grateful for the shift. "Especially the red one, mean as a snake and twice as clever." "Did you gather the eggs?" she asked. Chayton raised his left hand, showing several angry pecks. The red one defended her territory. Tahu chuckled. "My son, who has faced soldiers and bears, defeated by a chicken." "That was no ordinary chicken?" Chayton protested. "That thing's a demon in feathers." Laughter filled the cabin, real laughter. Clara realized it had been months since she'd heard such a sound within these walls. As the day wore on, they settled into an easy rhythm. Tahu dozed, then woke alert and eager to talk. He spoke of his youth, when the Apache moved freely, of buffalo hunts and sacred mountains, where boys became men. His stories were so vivid, Clara could nearly see the wide plains and endless skies. Chayton worked steadily through small repairs, occasionally adding his own memories. A first hunt, a horse that refused to be broken, the day he earned his adult name. He spoke little of recent years, of reservations or war. Those wounds were still too raw. In turn, Clara shared more than she intended. She spoke of her parents, hard-working, hopeful people carving a life from unforgiving land. Of Edna Boone's treasured books, carried west at great cost. Of Silas Boone's stubborn belief that a woman could own and work land as well as any man. "He filed the claim in my name," she said, as they shared a simple lunch of biscuits and preserves. "Said I'd need something of my own when he was gone. The town fathers didn't like it, but the law was the law." "A wise man," Tahu said. "Land is life. Without it, we become ghosts." The afternoon brought the conversation Clara had been dreading. Tahu's cough returned, worse than before. His short bursts of energy faded into long stretches of exhaustion, and the warmth in the cabin suddenly felt fragile. "He needs medicine I don't have," Clara Boone said quietly to Chayton as they stood by the window, watching snow drift down without end. "Real medicine, from town." Chayton's jaw set. "They won't sell it to Apache." They'll sell it to me, she replied. She drew a breath. I'll go tomorrow, once the snow eases. No. The word came out sharp, almost harsh. He caught himself and lowered his voice. I can't allow you to take that risk for us. What risk is my own town? Clara asked. I've made that trip 100 times. That was before you sheltered Apache, Chayton said. They will know. Small towns always did. Clara thought of Agnes Whitlow's web of whispers, of Sheriff Cole Barrett's ever-watchful suspicion, tracks leading to her cabin, smoke from her chimney when she should have been snowed in alone. I don't care what they think, she said, surprised by the force in her own voice. You should, Chayton answered quietly. I've seen what happens to white women who show kindness to Indians. It ends badly. And I've seen what happens to Apache men who trust white promises. Clara shot back. Yet here you are, in my home. They stood facing one another, tension crackling between them like lightning before a storm. A harsh cough cut through it. Enough, Tahu rasped. You argue like children while I breathe like a broken bellows. He lifted his gaze to Clara. Daughter. The word was deliberate. He watched her reaction closely. If you go to town, I would be grateful, Tahu continued, but only if my son goes with you. Father, no, Chayton began. You will not let her face their anger alone, Tahu said, his voice suddenly iron hard. And she will not let you face their hatred without her protection. Together, you may survive both. The logic left no room for argument, though neither Clara nor Chayton looked pleased. They spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. Clara made a careful list of supplies. Chayton checked and rechecked the rifle, then examined her boots, tightening worn laces and testing the soles. As evening fell, they shared another simple meal. The easy warmth of the morning had vanished, replaced by the weight of what tomorrow might bring. Clara noticed Chayton staring into the fire, his face carved into hard lines. What troubles you? She asked softly. I bring danger to your door, he said. That is poor repayment for kindness. You bring humanity to my door, Clara replied. That's worth any danger. Tahu, who had been silent through the meal, spoke then. My grandmother once told me an old story. They both turned toward him. A woman lived alone on a mountain, he said. Feared by those below, they claimed she was a witch who summoned storms. One night, a warrior came to her door seeking shelter. She let him in, and he saw she was no witch, only a woman whose loneliness had hardened into armor. And the warrior? Clara asked despite herself. He had armor of his own, Tahu said. Pride, anger at the cruelty of the world. Together, they learned to remove that armor, piece by piece. What happened to them? Clara asked. Tahu smiled faintly. What happens to all who dare to be vulnerable? They found something worth the risk. Chayton made a low sound of frustration. Father, stories won't help us tomorrow. Stories are all I have left to give, Tahu replied gently, along with hope that my son will learn to see beyond the next fight. The evening settled into quiet. Clara taught Chayton to play checkers with her father's carved set, amused by his fierce concentration over every move. Tahu dozed nearby, waking now and then to offer dry commentary. As the fire burned low and night deepened, the strange domestic calm tugged at Clara's heart. This was what she had once dreamed of. Companionship, shared laughter, the simple grace of not being alone. But dreams had a way of mocking reality. Tomorrow would bring the world waiting beyond her door. You fear tomorrow? Chayton said quietly as they prepared Tahu's bedding. No, Clara replied. Then she corrected herself. Yes, but not for me. I've faced their scorn for years. They'll see you as a threat, and frightened men are dangerous. I've faced dangerous men before, Chayton said. Not like this, Clara answered. Not with your father sick and depending on us. Promise me, whatever they say or do, don't let pride push you into something foolish. He was silent for a long moment. And you? He said at last. Will you promise the same? Clara Boone thought of Agnes Whitlow's sharp tongue, of Sheriff Cole Barrett's cold, measuring stare, of all the whispered judgments that had driven her into exile on this mountain. I promise I'll try, she said quietly, and I'll expect the same from you. They settled in for the night. Tahu slept deeply, eased by another dose of willowbark tea. Chayton insisted on taking first watch, urging Clara to rest for the journey ahead. She lay on her narrow bed, listening to the wind rake the cabin walls and to the soft sounds of Chayton tending the fire. It struck her how swiftly life could turn. 2 days ago, she had been alone, braced for another winter of solitude. Now her cabin sheltered 2 lives beyond her own. Tomorrow, she would walk into town beside an Apache warrior, defying every unspoken rule that had governed her existence. Was Tahu right? Was loneliness a kind of armor? And if so, what was left when that armor finally cracked? Sleep claimed her slowly. Before it did, she heard Chayton singing under his breath in Apache. Perhaps a lullaby, perhaps a prayer. The unfamiliar words wrapped around her like a blanket. They promised nothing, yet they brought comfort all the same. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. Tonight, she was not alone. Outside, the storm weakened, its fury spent. Inside the cabin, 3 souls found shelter in more than walls and timber. They found it in small kindnesses, shared silence, and the fragile hope that the world might be different from what it had always been. Clara's final waking thought was of her mother, Edna Boone's favorite verse. Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. She didn't know about angels, but as she drifted off to the sound of Chayton's quiet song, she thought that grace often arrived in unexpected forms. Tomorrow would test that grace. Tonight, it was enough. Morning broke hard and bright. Sunlight flashed blindingly off the snow as Clara Boone and Chayton made their way down the mountain trail. The storm had finally burned itself out, leaving the world hushed beneath a clean white shroud. Their breath rose in pale clouds. The only sounds were boots crunching through snow and the occasional crack of ice-laden branches. Clara led with steady confidence, knowing every bend and hazard of the path, even buried beneath winter. Chayton followed close behind, moving with the quiet alertness of a wolf. They had left Tahu resting peacefully, the cabin warm, stocked with wood and water. Still, Clara noticed how often Chayton glanced back until the cabin vanished from sight. He'll be fine, she said gently. The fever's broken. He has what he needs for a few hours. It isn't his body that troubles me, Chayton replied. It's his spirit. Each time we run, each time we're humiliated, it takes more from him than any sickness. They walked in silence through a steep stretch where Silas Boone had once carved rough steps into the hillside. When Clara slipped, Chayton steadied her with a brief touch at her elbow, short, respectful, yet warming her more than wool ever could. As they descended, the buildings of Cedar Ridge came into view. Smoke rose from chimneys. Figures moved about despite the early hour. Clara's stomach tightened. 7 years of chosen isolation had trained her to make town visits quick, buy supplies, avoid talk, retreat to the mountain. Now she entered with a companion who would draw every stare and sharpen every tongue. "Perhaps I should wait outside town," Chaitin suggested quietly. "No." The word came out firmer than she intended. "We go in together, as your father said. You waiting in the trees like a criminal would only feed suspicion." She stopped and faced him in the pale morning light. His features were sharply etched, the strong jaw, the scar through his brow, dark eyes heavy with weariness, and something else she refused to name. "Let them think what they want," Clara said. "They've been inventing stories about me for years. At least now they'll have a true one. That Clara Boone helped a sick old man and his son during a blizzard. If they twist that into something ugly," she added, "that's their failing, not ours." A faint smile touched Chaitin's mouth. "You have a fierce spirit, Clara Boone." "I have a stubborn one," she corrected. "Sometimes they look the same." They entered Cedar Ridge along the main street. Their boots struck loudly against the wooden sidewalks, freshly cleared of snow. The general store stood at the corner, windows glowing warm against the cold. Clara could see movement inside, early shoppers, and undoubtedly early gossips. The moment they stepped through the door, every voice died. Clara counted 5 people besides Eli Turner, who stood behind the counter. Sarah Whitman, Hank Whitman's wife. Widow Carson, young Jesse Cole, the stock boy. And inevitably, Agnes Whitlow, stationed near the pickle barrel like a sentry. "Well now," Agnes said, her voice slicing through the silence like a rusted blade. "Look what the storm dragged in. Clara Boone and company." Clara moved toward the counter with as much dignity as she could summon, acutely aware of Chaitin's solid presence at her back. "Good morning, Eli Turner. I'll need supplies." Clara Boone's voice was steady, though every eye in the store was already cutting toward her. Eli Turner, a thin man who always looked as though he'd tasted something bitter, shifted uneasily. His gaze flicked from Clara to Chaitin, then back again. "Didn't expect to see you out in weather like that, Miss Boone." "The storm passed," Clara replied evenly. She unfolded her list and placed it on the counter. "I need these items, and whatever medicine you carry for lung fever." "Medicine?" Agnes Whitlow stepped closer, her small eyes sharp with interest. "Who's sick, Clara? You? Or your guest?" Clara felt the tension rise behind her, but didn't turn. "That's not your concern, Agnes." Agnes sniffed. "Nothing in this town is just your concern, especially when you bring one of them into decent company." Her gaze slid over Chaitin with open contempt. "Honestly, Clara, have you no shame, no respect for proper folk?" "Proper folk?" Clara's voice rose before she could stop it. "Proper folk help anyone in need during a blizzard. They don't shut the door and let people freeze." "Anyone?" Agnes sneered. "That's no anyone. That's an Apache, a savage. God knows how much blood is on his hands." "The only blood on my hands," Chaitin said quietly, "is from your friend's demon chicken." A sound escaped Jesse Cole, half laugh, half cough, before he quickly stifled it under Agnes's glare. Eli Turner hurried to gather the supplies, clearly eager to end the exchange. "I don't have much in the way of medicine," he said apologetically. "Some laudanum, willow bark powder, tonic mixes, quinine." "I'll take whatever you have," Clara said. "You'll take nothing." The new voice came from the doorway. Sheriff Cole Barrett stood there, broad-shouldered, his hand resting casually on the butt of his pistol. He was a big man gone soft with age and drink. his face carrying the hard lines of someone who'd once looked respectable, before whiskey and cruelty took their due. Not until I understand what's going on here. I'm purchasing supplies, Clara said, forcing calm into her voice. Last I checked, that wasn't against the law. Harboring fugitives is, Barrett replied, his pale eyes fixed on Chayton. You there? What's your name? Which agency you from? Chayton stood still as stone. Clara could feel the danger radiating from him. My name is Chayton, he said evenly. We came from Fort Apache. Came from? Barrett stepped closer, the sour scent of liquor heavy on his breath. You mean ran from? Indians don't leave the reservation without papers. You got papers? We were told to leave, Chayton answered carefully. The agent... I don't care what some agent said, Barrett cut in. No papers means you're a fugitive, and that makes Clara Boone guilty of harboring. That's absurd, Clara snapped. They came to my door in a blizzard. His father is dying of lung fever. What was I supposed to do? Agnes Whitlow cut in sharply. What any sensible white woman would do, bar the door and protect herself. From what? Clara shot back. An old man struggling to breathe? Her restraint finally shattered. You preach Christian charity every Sunday, Agnes. But when it's time to practice it, you're colder than yesterday's ashes. Agnes's face flushed an angry red. How dare you lecture me on Christianity while standing there bold as brass with a savage? Everyone knows what you've been doing up on that mountain, living in sin, corrupting yourself. That's enough. Chayton's voice was low, controlled, and it carried authority enough that Agnes actually stepped back. You will not speak to her that way. Barrett's fingers tightened on his pistol. You threatening white women now? I am defending one, Chayton replied, never breaking eye contact. Though I question why that duty falls to me when you wear the badge. The tension in the store thickened. Clara saw Eli Turner edge toward the back room. Jessie Cole had gone pale as chalk. Only Agnes seemed invigorated, her eyes bright with the promise of violence. Then a gentler voice broke through. Please. Sarah Whitman stepped forward, her tone calm but firm. This isn't necessary. Clara, Hank mentioned seeing smoke from your cabin after the storm. We were worried. She met Clara's eyes. I'm glad you're safe. The unexpected kindness nearly unraveled her. Clara blinked hard, swallowing the sudden sting behind her eyes. Thank you, Sarah Whitman. We're all right. I just need these supplies, and then we'll be on our way. Not so fast, Sheriff Cole Barrett said. I haven't made a decision yet. A decision about what? Clara Boone asked sharply. Another voice joined them. May Lynn stood framed in the doorway, her slight figure nearly hidden behind a large wicker basket balanced on her hip. The laundress was one of the few people in Cedar Ridge who had always shown Clara quiet kindness, perhaps because she too understood what it meant to live as an outsider. Decide to arrest Miss Clara, May Lynn said calmly. For helping sick man during blizzard? That will look very fine in newspapers. She tilted her head slightly. Sheriff arrests woman for Christian charity. Very good story, very helpful for next election. Barrett's face darkened. Stay out of this, Chinaman. This is American business. May Lynn didn't flinch. American business is my business. I am American now. Citizen. I vote. My husband votes. All Chinese in town vote. Her eyes held his. You remember this. The words were soft, but everyone heard the threat beneath them. The Chinese community in Cedar Ridge was small, but united. And in a town where elections were often decided by only a few ballots, their support mattered. Eli Turner seized the moment. "Here are your supplies," he said quickly, sliding a wrapped bundle across the counter. "Including the medicine, that'll be $2. Clara knew instantly it was less than the true cost. Eli's quiet resistance to the ugliness that had taken over his store. She paid without comment. Before she could lift the bundle, Chayton took it from her hands. "We go now," Maylin announced. She glanced at Chayton with open curiosity, but no trace of fear. "I walk with you. I need go same direction." It was a lie. The laundry was the other way. But Clara accepted the escort without question. They reached the door when Barrett stepped forward again, blocking their path. "This isn't over," he warned. "I'll be sending word to Fort Apache. If I find out you're lying, then you'll finally do your job," Clara said, surprised by her own steadiness, which would be a welcome change from threatening law-abiding citizens. Someone, perhaps Jesse Cole, made a choking sound that might have been approval. Barrett's face flushed purple, but with Maylin watching and Sarah Whitman still standing nearby, he stepped aside. They had nearly reached the door when Agnes Whitlow couldn't resist. "Looks like Clara Boone finally found a man desperate enough to take her," she called. "Had to be a savage to warm her bed." Clara felt Chayton stop, felt the storm gathering in the sudden stillness of his body. Without thinking, she placed her hand on his arm. Solid, tense, ready to break. "No," she said quietly. "She isn't worth it." For a heartbeat, she wasn't sure he would listen. Then the tension eased, just enough. He allowed her to guide him outside. Maylin followed, closing the door firmly behind them, cutting off Agnes's venom. The cold air struck like a blessing after the poison inside. They walked briskly, Maylin chatting about harmless things, the weather, her grandson's first tooth, the trouble of finding good lye for soap. Her presence discouraged pursuit, though Clara felt eyes burning from every window. At the edge of town, Maylin stopped. "I go back now," she said. "You be careful, Miss Clara. That sheriff, he like dog with bone. He not let go easy." "Thank you," Clara said, meaning far more than the words could carry. "For everything." Maylin studied Chayton closely. "You take care of her," she said. "She have good heart, sometimes not good sense. Helps everyone but herself." Chayton inclined his head. "I understand." Maylin smiled then, softening her stern face. "Good. You come laundry next time. I give good price. Apache or not, everyone need clean clothes." She bustled away, leaving Clara and Chayton alone on the snow-covered road. They walked in silence as Cedar Ridge fell behind them, and the climb back toward the cabin began. "I'm sorry," Clara said at last. They were worse than usual. "You have nothing to apologize for," Chayton replied. "Their hatred is not yours to carry." "No," she said softly. "But I brought you into it." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "That woman, Agnes, she has wounded you before." It wasn't a question. Clara Boone kicked at a drift of snow, watching the crystals scatter across the trail. "She's the sheriff's sister-in-law," she said bitterly. "Thinks that gives her the right to judge everyone who breathes in this valley." She climbed a few steps before continuing. "She's been poisoning people against me ever since I turned down her nephew 4 years ago. He drank hard and hit harder, but in her mind, I should have been grateful anyone wanted me at all. And the sheriff? He allows it." She gave a short, humorless laugh. "More than that, he encourages it. Sheriff Cole Barrett has had his eye on my land for years. Thinks a woman alone can't possibly manage it. If he could find a legal excuse to take it, he would. Making my life miserable enough that I leave on my own suits him just fine. They climbed in silence for a stretch, the path steep enough to demand attention. Still, Clara was acutely aware of Chayton beside her, the tension he carried, the anger still simmering beneath his calm. "What Agnes Whitlow said back there," she began, then hesitated. "About why you're with me. I want you to know I don't believe—" "I know what you believe," Chayton interrupted gently, "just as you know what I believe. Her poison cannot touch what is true." Heat rose to Clara's cheeks despite the cold. "And what is true?" He stopped and turned to face her on the narrow trail. "Truth is, you opened your door to strangers who had nothing to offer. Truth is, you give kindness without asking what it will cost you. Truth is, you stood in that store and defended us when silence would have been safer." His voice softened. "Truth is, my father smiles when he speaks to you, and he has not smiled in many months." "He reminds me of my own father," Clara said quietly, her throat tightening. "Stubborn, wise, too proud to admit when he needs help." "Yes," Chayton agreed, "and he sees something in you. My father has always had the gift of seeing people as they truly are." He paused. "That is why Rafe Calder feared him. False promises never fooled him." They resumed walking. The cabin came into view around the bend, smoke still curling from the chimney, a reassuring sign. "They'll cause trouble now," Chayton said. "The sheriff won't forget the insult. Let him come," Clara replied, with more confidence than she felt. "I've done nothing wrong." "When has that ever mattered to men like him?" Chayton said quietly. She had no answer. She thought of Barrett's bloodshot eyes, the barely restrained violence in his voice. He was a man who enjoyed power, who fed on fear and submission. Today she had shown neither. He would not forgive that. As they reached the cabin, the door opened. Tahu stood in the doorway, leaning heavily on the frame but upright and alert. "Father," Chayton hurried forward, "you should be resting." "I have rested enough," Tahu said, though he allowed his son to guide him back inside. "The spirit said you would return needing strong medicine, and they were right." His gaze moved between them. "I can smell the town's hatred on you, like smoke." Clara unpacked the supplies, deliberately focusing on the task. Still, her hands trembled slightly as she measured out the medicine Eli Turner had included. "Sit," Tahu commanded, gesturing toward the chairs by the fire. "Both of you, tell me what happened." They did, trading turns, recounting the morning. Tahu listened without interrupting, his weathered face growing grave. At last, he spoke. "This sheriff, he is the kind of man who must break what he cannot control. I have known many like him. Soldier, agent, settler. Different faces. Same heart. Small. Afraid. Cruel. I'm not afraid of him," Clara said. "You should be," Tahu replied gently. "Not frozen by fear, but aware. A cornered snake is dangerous, and you have cornered him with your defiance." "What would you have had me do?" she asked. "Lower my head and swallow their insults?" "No." A faint smile touched his mouth. "You did what a warrior does. You protected your people." She stared at him. "Your people?" "Do not look so surprised," Tahu said calmly. "From the moment you opened that door, we became bound. This is the way of things." Chayton made a frustrated sound. "Father, This is not our fight. We should leave as soon as you are strong enough. We have brought danger to her door." "And where would we go?" Tahu asked. "Back to the agency that cast us out, south to Mexico where we know no one, or wander these mountains until the cold finishes what men began." He shook his head slowly. "No. Running does not always mean survival." "No, my son," Tahu said calmly. "Sometimes the spirits place us exactly where we must be, not where we believe we want to go." Clara Boone looked from father to son. She saw the struggle in Chaitin's face, the tension between duty and instinct, and the quiet certainty in Tahu's eyes. "You're welcome here as long as you need shelter," she said softly. "Both of you." Tahu inclined his head toward his son. "You see? She understands. Home is not always the place of our birth. Sometimes it is the place where we are received without fear." The rest of the day passed in outward calm, yet the morning's confrontation lingered like a shadow. Clara startled at every creak of the cabin, every gust rattling the shutters. More than once she caught herself watching the windows, half expecting a rifle barrel or an unfamiliar face to appear. Chaitin was no less alert. He stepped outside often, scanning the tree line and the ridges beyond, his posture loose but ready. As evening settled and they shared another simple meal, Clara felt it clearly. Something fundamental had shifted. Not in her relationship with the town, that had been fractured long ago, but in how she saw herself, in what she was willing to endure, and in what she was finally willing to defend. "You are troubled," Tahu observed as she cleared the dishes. Clara managed a faint smile. "I keep thinking about what Mei Lin said, that I have a good heart, but not much sense. She might be right. The heart and the head rarely agree," Tahu replied. "The head tells us how to be safe. The heart reminds us how to remain human. When forced to choose, I have learned to trust the heart." Later, as they prepared for sleep, Chaitin caught her arm gently. "What my father said is true. But if you wish us to leave, to spare you more trouble, we will understand." Clara looked up at him. This man who had entered her life only days ago, yet already felt rooted in it. "Your father is right about something else," she said quietly. "Sometimes the spirits place us where we need to be. You needed shelter, and I needed—" She hesitated, then continued. "I needed to remember I am more than what this town decided I was." "You are far more than that," Chaitin said softly. "They are fools not to see it." That night, Clara lay awake listening to the wind and the steady breathing of her guests. She thought about courage and kindness, about the cost of standing firm and the greater cost of surrendering oneself. By morning, Sheriff Cole Barrett would likely make good on his threats. The whispers of Cedar Ridge would sharpen into accusations. But tonight, her cabin held warmth, quiet voices, and something that felt dangerously close to family. Whatever came, she would not regret opening her door during the storm. Some choices were worth any price. Even the wrath of a small town and its small-minded lawman. The fire burned low, throwing long shadows against the log walls. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft this time, gentle, like a blessing instead of a warning. And in the darkness, 3 souls found shelter not only from winter, but from a world that too often confused cruelty with strength and mercy with weakness. Tomorrow would bring its trials. Tonight, they were safe. And that was enough. The snow continued for 3 more days, sealing the cabin inside a white silence. Clara had never minded being snowbound before. It was part of mountain life. But this time was different. This time, the cabin was full of life. Conversation warmed the hours. Laughter came easily. Time slipped by unnoticed. Chaitin proved invaluable. He repaired loose shingles from inside the attic, sealed gaps where cold air whistled through the logs, and fashioned new hinges for a cupboard door that had hung crooked for months. His hands were never idle. Strong hands, Clara noticed. Hands built to protect, but just as capable of creating. Tahu, growing stronger each day, became the keeper of stories. He taught Clara Apache words for simple things. Goshe, fire. Tu, water. Ni, earth. But more than language, he taught her ways of seeing. Your people see time as a straight road, he explained one afternoon by the fire. Past behind, future ahead. But for us, time is a circle. What has been will come again. What is broken may yet mend. What is separated may reunite. That's comforting, Clara said, carefully mending a tear in one of Chaitin's shirts. But some things, once broken, can't be fixed. Cannot, Tahu corrected gently, or will not. Often, we confuse the two. Chaitin looked up from the trap he was repairing. My father believes everything has purpose, even suffering. And you don't? Clara asked. I believe suffering is still suffering, he said quietly. Purpose or not, it leaves scars. The conversation drifted to lighter ground, but Clara noticed the way Tahu watched his son. Concern etched deep into his weathered face. Later, when Chaitin went out to check the horses in the lean-to shelter, Tahu spoke to Clara Boone in a low, careful voice. My son carries wounds you cannot see, he said. He was married once. Clara's hands stilled over the torn seam she was mending. What happened? She died when the soldiers came to force us onto the reservation, Tahu replied. They said it was an accident, but there are no accidents in war, only choices and consequences. How long ago? Clara asked quietly. 4 winters. He has not spoken her name since. Tahu's gaze drifted to the fire. Grief became anger. Anger became hardness. I feared his heart would turn to stone. He smiled then, sadly. But even stone can crack when it meets the right force. Before Clara could ask what he meant, Chaitin returned, shaking snow from his hair. The horses are fine. Your shelter's better built than it looks. My father knew how to build for these mountains, Clara said, grateful for the change of subject. He always said you had to work with the land, not fight it. A wise man, Chaitin agreed. Then he hesitated. There were tracks outside. A single rider circled the cabin yesterday. Stayed in the trees. Clara's stomach tightened. Sheriff Cole Barrett, she said, or one of his men. They didn't approach, Chaitin continued. Just watched. Let them watch, Clara said, with more courage than she felt. Looking isn't a crime. But they all knew it was more than looking. It was a warning. That night, Chaitin insisted on keeping a watch, positioning himself where he could see both windows and the door. On the 4th day, the snow finally stopped. Sunlight burst across the mountains, turning the world into a blinding field of white. Clara stepped outside to feed the chickens and gather eggs, breathing in the clean, sharp air. The red hen, true to form, pecked viciously before surrendering her clutch. Still fighting the good fight, Clara muttered. Good for you. Never give up. When she returned, she found Tahu teaching Chaitin an intricate pattern with a loop of string, a spirit web. Their fingers moved in careful coordination, shapes forming and dissolving between their hands. This was your grandmother's favorite, Tahu was saying. She could make the stars dance with string. Clara watched, fascinated. There was something deeply intimate in the scene. Knowledge passing from father to son, traditions kept alive by memory and care. "Would you like to learn?" Tahu asked, noticing her. "I wouldn't want to intrude," Clara said. "Knowledge shared is knowledge doubled," he replied. "Come, I will show you the beginning pattern. Chaitan, help her." So Clara sat close to Chaitan, their hands brushing as he guided her fingers. He smelled of pine and wood smoke. When she tangled the pattern for the third time, he smiled faintly. "You're thinking too hard. Feel the rhythm. Don't force it." "Easy for you to say," Clara muttered. "You've done this since childhood." "Actually, I was terrible at it," he admitted. "My sister had the clever fingers. She used to laugh at me." It was the first time he'd mentioned family beyond his father. Clara sensed the fragility of the memory and didn't press. The afternoon passed in quiet companionship. String patterns, stories, easy silences. As evening fell, Tahu dozed by the fire while Clara prepared supper. Chaitan helped, their movements now familiar. "The storm is over," he said softly. "We should leave tomorrow." Clara's hands paused in the biscuit dough. "Your father is stronger, but he's not ready for hard travel. He's ready enough. We've stayed too long." "You haven't imposed at all," Clara said firmly. "You've helped more than anyone has in years." "That isn't why we helped." "I know. She needed harder than necessary. But this isn't about debts. He still needs rest and proper food. The trail south is dangerous. And staying brings danger to your door," Chaitan replied. "That rider wasn't nothing." "He was just trying to scare me," Clara said. "If Sheriff Cole Barrett had legal cause, he'd have acted already." Chaitan stepped closer, urgency in his voice. "Men like him don't always wait for cause, they make one." "Men like Sheriff Cole Barrett don't need legal cause," Chaitan said. "They make their own law." "Then running won't save us," Clara Boone replied. She turned to face him, flour-dusted hands set on her hips. "If he wants trouble, he'll bring it whether you're here or gone. At least if you're here. At least if we're here, what?" Chaitan searched her face. "What do you gain from our presence besides danger?" Clara felt 1,000 answers rise. Laughter in a silent house, warmth against long nights, the feeling of being truly seen. But she chose the simplest truth. "I gain friends," she said. "That's worth the risk." Something in Chaitan softened, as if a hard edge eased. "Clara," he said gently, "the biscuits will burn." She turned back to the stove too quickly, cheeks warm for reasons that had nothing to do with heat. That evening, as they ate venison stew and fresh biscuits, Tahu told them the story of Coyote and the stars. His voice danced with mischief, and even Chaitan smiled when Coyote failed yet again. Clara laughed outright. "Why does Coyote keep trying?" she asked. "He always fails." "Because it is his nature," Tahu said. "He reaches for what is beautiful, even when it burns him. In this, he is very human." After supper, they settled by the fire. Clara mended by lamplight, while the men spoke quietly in Apache. The tone grew serious, then sharp. At last, Chaitan rose and stepped outside. "He struggles," Tahu said into the silence. "His heart and his mind are at war, about leaving, about many things." He studied Clara. "You know, my son has feelings for you." Her needle slipped, pricking her finger. "We barely know each other." "The heart keeps no calendar," Tahu replied. "It knows what it knows. The question is what you will do with it." "Nothing," Clara said firmly. "When you leave, if you leave, life goes back to how it was." Tahu sighed, half amusement, half sorrow. You are both determined to be unhappy. It would be funny if it were not so sad. Chayton returned, cold air following him. He avoided their eyes and banked the fire. The room felt charged, like the air before a storm. Clara noticed his bedroll moved closer to the door. That night, she lay awake, listening to Tahu's steadier breathing, the fire settling, the wind testing the windows. Near midnight, Chayton rose and went to the window, a dark silhouette against moonlit snow. "What is it?" she whispered. "Nothing certain," he said. "Just a feeling." She joined him, shawl tight around her shoulders. "I've lived here 7 years. I know when something's wrong." He hesitated, then spoke. There were more tracks today. 3, maybe 4 riders. Watching, planning. Planning what? Nothing good. He turned to her, moonlight carving his face into sharp lines. "I should not have let you go to town. Should not have let them see us together." "Let you?" Indignation flared. "I don't recall asking your permission." A faint smile touched his mouth. "No. You ask no one's permission. It is one of your strengths." His gaze darkened. "And one of your dangers." They stood close in the darkness, the narrow space between them feeling both immense and meaningless at once. Clara Boone was acutely aware of Chayton's presence, of the coiled strength in his stillness, of the way his gaze never left her face. "I'm not afraid," she said quietly, "and that's what frightens me most." Without thinking, she lifted her hand and brushed the scar along his cheekbone. "How did you get this?" He went utterly still, but did not pull away. "A soldier's bayonet. I was 15. I tried to protect my sister." His jaw tightened. "I failed." "What happened to her?" "She lived," he said. "Married a white man who promised to keep her safe. I haven't seen her in 6 years. She calls herself Eliza Crow now, lives in California, pretends to be Mexican, so no one knows she carries Apache blood." The restraint in his voice hurt more than open anger. "I'm sorry," Clara whispered. "Don't be. She survived. That's what matters." "Is it?" Clara challenged softly. "Surviving isn't the same as living." He studied her. "Says the woman who's been hiding on this mountain for 7 years. The words should have stung, but his tone held no cruelty. "I wasn't hiding," she said. "I was waiting." "For what?" She didn't have an answer she could speak aloud. How could she explain she'd been waiting for someone who saw more than a town's judgment? For someone who made her cabin feel like a home instead of a refuge? "I don't know," she said at last. "Maybe for a storm to blow strangers to my door." Chayton's hand rose, covering hers where it still rested against his face. "Clara, when this is over." A sudden sound cut him off. Horses, fast, close. Chayton moved instantly, pulling Clara behind him and lifting the rifle from its pegs. "Wake my father," he said under his breath. But Tahu was already awake, sitting upright with the alertness of a man shaped by danger. "How many?" the old man asked. 3, maybe 4, Chayton replied, checking the rifle. The horses stopped beyond the clearing. Voices murmured. Leather creaked. Then a shout tore through the night. "Clara Boone, this is Sheriff Cole Barrett. Open up. I've got a warrant for the arrest of the Apache fugitives you're hiding." Clara stepped toward the door, but Chayton caught her arm. "No. Make him come to us." "What do you want, Sheriff?" she called through the door. "It's the middle of the night." "Open this door or we break it down," Barrett slurred. "You've got 1 minute." "He has no warrant," Tahu said calmly. "No judge would sign such a paper without cause. "He lies," Clara said, her voice steady. She looked at both men. "Whatever happens, follow my lead. This is my land, my fight." "Clara," Chayton began. "Trust me." She lifted the bar and opened the door. Barrett stood on the porch, flanked by 3 men Clara recognized at once. Caleb Drayton, run out of 2 counties for rustling. Luke Drayton, who'd beaten his wife until she fled east. And Grant Morrow, more familiar with the saloon than honest work. Hardly a lawful posse. "Where's the warrant?" Clara demanded. Barrett's bloodshot eyes narrowed. "Don't get clever with me, woman. We know you've got those savages in there." "I have 2 guests who sought shelter from a blizzard." Clara replied evenly. "Since when is hospitality a crime?" "Since they're fugitive Indians," Barrett snarled, shoving toward the doorway. Clara didn't move. "You can't enter without a warrant. That's the law." "I am the law," Barrett snapped. Then stopped as Chayton stepped into view behind her, rifle held loose but ready. Tahu joined them, dignified despite his frailty. "Well now," Barrett said with ugly satisfaction, "the fugitives show themselves." "We are not fugitives," Tahu said quietly. "We were expelled from the agency for speaking truth. Is truth illegal in America now?" "You left the reservation without papers," Barrett said. "That's all I need." "Then arrest us," Chayton challenged. "Take us before a real judge. Let the law decide." Barrett's hand slid toward his gun. "Or maybe you'll try to run. Maybe I'll have to stop you, permanent-like." The threat hung in the frozen air. Clara felt Chayton tense, ready to strike. But it was Tahu who spoke next. His voice carried a weight that stopped every man cold. "You come in darkness like thieves," Tahu said. "You borrow courage from whiskey and bring men known for cruelty. You threaten a woman and an elder. Is this what you call white man's justice?" He stepped forward. Despite his sickness and years, there was something commanding in him, something that demanded attention. "I have lived long enough to watch promises broken and sacred things stolen. Still, I believed some white men carried honor." His eyes held Sheriff Cole Barrett without blinking. Was I wrong? For a heartbeat, even Barrett hesitated, unsettled by the old man's dignity. Then his face hardened. "Pretty words won't save you," he snapped, turning to Clara Boone. "Last chance. Hand them over, or you share their fate." "Then I share their fate," Clara said, clear and steady. "And tomorrow," she continued, "the whole town will hear how their sheriff crept up here drunk, without a warrant, threatening a woman and 2 men whose only crime was surviving a storm. Who's going to believe you?" Barrett's laugh cut her off, harsh and ugly. "You won't be alive to tell anyone." The sharp click of Chayton cocking the rifle shattered the night. "You touch her," he said calmly, "you die." Barrett's men shifted. This wasn't what they'd come for. They'd expected fear, easy prey, not steel. Caleb Drayton looked especially uneasy. He was brave only when the odds favored him. "Big talk from a savage," Barrett sneered, but the certainty had left his voice. "You shoot a lawman, they'll hang you." "Maybe," Chayton said, "but you'll already be dead." The standoff stretched tight as a drawn bow. Clara felt her heart hammering, the cold bleeding through her thin nightdress. Someone would break. Either Barrett's drunken nerve or his men's fragile loyalty. It was Tahu who broke it, but not with words. He swayed suddenly, a hand clutching his chest. "My heart," he gasped, and collapsed. "Father!" Chayton caught him as he fell, the rifle forgotten. Clara dropped to her knees, fingers searching for a pulse. He's alive, she said urgently. But his heart's racing. We need to get him inside. For a moment, something human flickered across Barrett's face. Then he stepped back. Get him inside, he growled. But this isn't over. You've got 3 days. He pointed a finger at Clara. 3 days to get these savages off your land. Then I come back with papers and a real posse, or I arrest all 3 of you. He turned and stomped away, his men following with unmistakable relief. Inside, Clara and Chayton laid Tahu on his pallet. His eyes fluttered open as Clara cooled his face with water. Did they leave? He whispered. Yes, Clara said softly. Rest now. A faint smile touched his lips. Sometimes weakness is stronger than strength, he murmured. They can face guns, not an old man's failing heart. Chayton let out a shaky sound, half laugh, half sob. You frightened us. I frightened myself, Tahu admitted. Only a little. The heart truly did race. No one slept. They took turns watching the windows and the old man through the long night. When dawn painted the mountains in pink and gold, Clara poured coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe. 3 days, Chayton said quietly at the window. He means it. I know, Clara replied, warming her hands around the cup. But 3 days is time. Time to think, time to plan. We can't fight the whole town. Maybe we don't have to, Clara said. Sarah Whitman, May Lynn, Eli Turner. Not everyone in Cedar Ridge stands with Barrett. She glanced at Tahu, sleeping peacefully now, his breathing steady. Maybe it's time they remembered they still have a choice. She thought of the string patterns Tahu had shown her, the quiet stories by firelight, the way he called her daughter. She looked at Chayton, who had worked beside her, guarded her door, and made the cabin feel less lonely than it had in 7 long years. Then we face that too, Clara Boone said simply. Whatever comes, we face it together. Chayton was silent for a moment. Then he took the coffee cup from her hands and set it aside, enclosing her fingers in his. They were warm, calloused, steady. You could leave, he said. Go to another town. Start over where no one knows you sheltered an Apache. You have 3 days to save yourself. I spent 7 years saving myself, Clara replied. Hiding up here, safe, alone, slowly drying out inside. She shook her head. I'm finished with that kind of saving, even if it means real danger, even if Sheriff Cole Barrett keeps his word. She squeezed his hands. Some things are worth the risk. Your father was right. I've been confusing cannot with will not for far too long. The sun climbed, pouring gold through the windows. Outside, snow glittered like scattered diamonds. It was a beautiful morning, despite everything, or perhaps because of it. The ugliness of the night had burned away excuses, leaving only truth. 3 days. 3 days to find an answer or face the cost. 3 days to learn whether Cedar Ridge still had a conscience to appeal to. 3 days to admit what had been growing between her and Chayton since the first knock on her door. It wasn't much time. But then again, Clara thought, it had taken only one storm to change everything. Maybe 3 days could hold another miracle. Tahu stirred and opened his eyes. Good morning, my children, he said, seeing them together. The sun rises on a new day. What will we make of it? Clara met Chayton's gaze, then looked to the old man who had become family in so little time. Whatever we must, she said. Whatever we must. The first of the 3 days dawned cold and clear. Clara stood at the window, watching sunlight turn the snow-capped peaks to fire. She could hear Chayton helping his father with the morning routine. Familiar, comforting sounds, now edged with urgency. "You're going to town," Chayton said. It wasn't a question. "I have to try," Clara replied, turning. "Some people there are good. They've just been quiet too long. Maybe if I speak to them face to face." "It's dangerous. Barrett will be watching." "He'll be sleeping off his whiskey until noon," Clara countered. "And I know the back trails. I can reach the Whitmans without touching the main street." Tahu spoke from his chair. "She is right to try. Words before weapons, always." Then his gaze sharpened. "But daughter, do not go empty-handed." "I can't take Chayton," Clara said. "That would give Barrett exactly what he wants." "Not my son?" Tahu agreed. "Take your strength. Take your truth. And take this." He reached into a worn pouch and drew out a small object wrapped in soft leather. "This was Noma's," he said. "A woman of courage should carry the blessing of another woman of courage." Clara unwrapped it carefully. Inside lay a small silver medallion, smoothed by years, etched with symbols she didn't recognize. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It is protection," Tahu said. "Not from bullets or hatred, but from losing yourself when facing another's darkness." Clara fastened the medallion inside her coat, feeling its weight settle near her heart. "Thank you." She left within the hour, taking the old deer trail that curved around the mountain's shoulder. The path was slick with snow, but she knew every stone and root. As she walked, she shaped her words, appeals to conscience, to memory, to shared ground. The Whitman homestead lay in a gentle valley, smoke curling from the chimney. Relief washed over her when she saw Hank Whitman alone in the barn. "Clara," he said, straightening from the stalls, surprise written across his weathered face. "Heard there was trouble at your place last night." "News travels fast," Clara said dryly. Hank Whitman's face tightened with worry. "Barrett rode through at dawn," he said. "Early, rounding up men for a posse. Told folks you're hiding dangerous fugitives. I'm giving shelter to a sick old man and his son who got caught in a storm." Clara Boone shot back. "Since when is mercy a crime?" "Since Barrett decided it was." Hank leaned his pitchfork against the stall. His honest features creased the way Clara remembered from childhood, the look he wore when he was weighing a hard truth. "Clara, I've known you since you were knee-high. You're good people. But taking in an Apache, folks are stirred up." "Stirred up by lies," Clara said, heat rising. "They're not criminals." Tahu spoke up about cut rations at the agency. For that, they threw him out into a blizzard. Hank rubbed his jaw. "That don't sound right. But right or wrong don't count for much once Barrett sets his mind." He hesitated. "And after what happened to the Pemberton place down Miller's Creek?" "What happened?" "An Apache raid," Hank said heavily. "Whole family killed but the youngest boy. Found him 3 days later in the root cellar, half frozen." Clara's heart sank. She hadn't heard. It would make everything harder. "Those weren't my guests," she said firmly. "Tahu is a grandfather who tells stories and makes string figures. Chayton has done nothing but mend my cabin and stand between me and Barrett's drunken threats. They deserve justice, not a mob." "Maybe so," Hank said slowly. "But Barrett's been building support all morning. He's got Caleb Drayton saying you pulled a gun. Luke Drayton claims the Apaches threatened to burn the town. And Grant Morrow. He's drunk enough to swear to anything for another bottle. Caleb's a thief, Luke's a brute, and Grant hasn't drawn a sober breath in years," Clara snapped. People believe what they want when they're scared. Hank glanced toward the house, where Sarah Whitman moved past the kitchen window. I've got my own family to think of. I can't stand against the whole town. The words hit Clara like a blow. Hank had been her father's friend, helped bury Silas Boone and Edna Boone. If he wouldn't help, "I'm not asking you to fight anyone," she said, forcing her voice steady. "Just don't ride with Barrett. Stay neutral, that's all." Hank was quiet a long moment. "Sarah likes you," he said at last. "Always has. Says you remind her of her sister back east. Too smart for your own good, but kind." He sighed. "I won't ride with Barrett. Can't promise more than that. But I won't be part of a mob." It was something. Clara thanked him and left, taking a long way around to Mei Lin's laundry. The small building sat at the edge of town, cut off from the respectable shops by an invisible line of prejudice. Mei Lin stood alone over a great steaming pot, and her face brightened when she saw Clara. "Miss Clara, I worry after yesterday," she said. "That sheriff, he's like a dog with a bone." Clara said wearily, "More like a rabid one." She swallowed. "Mei Lin, I need help. Barrett's forming a posse. He's given me 3 days to send my guests away. I don't think he'll wait." Mei Lin's expression hardened. "I know mobs. California before we come here. Mob burn our shop. Say Chinese steal white man's work. We lose everything. Start over here." She stirred the pot with sharp, angry motions. "Barrett's same as those men. Use fear to make hate. Use hate to take what he wants." "What does he want?" Clara asked. "Your land," Mei Lin said. "Power, yes, but mostly—" She tapped the spoon against the rim. "He want everyone to fear him. You don't. That make him crazy." Clara sank onto a wooden crate, exhaustion washing over her. "I don't know what to do. I can't abandon Tahu and Chayton, but I can't fight the whole town." Mei Lin set the spoon aside and sat beside her. "You know the story of David and Goliath," Mei Lin said softly. "Of course. Everyone remembers David had a stone," she went on. "But the true weapon was faith. Faith that what is right can be stronger than what is powerful." She patted Clara Boone's hand. "You have that faith." "I'm trying," Clara said, voice thin. "Trying harder." "And practical help," Mei Lin added. "My husband's cousin is a lawyer in Denver. He knows Indian law. I already sent word. Maybe he comes, maybe not. But the law is bigger than Sheriff Cole Barrett." Hope stirred in Clara's chest. Real hope. A real lawyer. Someone who knew the statutes and precedents. Someone who had fought for Chinese rights, Indian rights, any rights when money or mercy demanded it. Mei Lin smiled faintly. "I will also speak with the other Chinese families. We remember who stood with us and who harmed us. Elections come every 2 years. Sheriffs learn that votes can matter more than guns." Clara hugged her without thinking. "Thank you." "No thanks needed," Mei Lin said. "Yesterday you stood in the store. You defended Apache men when no one else spoke. I do not forget that." Her face sobered. "But be careful. Barrett is not stupid. Mean, yes, but he plans." Clara left through the back door, hood pulled low. She'd done what she could in town. Now she needed to reach the cabin before anyone noticed she was gone. Halfway up the mountain, she heard horses. Her heart leapt. She slipped behind a cluster of boulders, pressing herself flat to the cold stone. The riders came into view. Caleb Drayton and 2 men she didn't know, all armed. "He said to check the north trail," one muttered. "See if she tries to sneak them out that way." Waste of time, Caleb grumbled. Just burn her out and be done with it. Barrett said wait, another replied. Caleb spat. Legal. Since when does Barrett care about legal? He just wants to stretch it out. Make her sweat. They passed within 20 feet. Clara held her breath, fingers clenched around the small medallion Tahu had given her, pressed hard between palm and rock. Only when the hoofbeats faded did she move, shaking. The rest of the climb was tense, every sound a threat. She reached the cabin at last. Chayton met her at the door with his rifle, easing only when he saw her face. Trouble? He asked. Barrett's got men watching the trails, she said. And there was a raid over at Miller's Creek, an Apache attack. The timing couldn't be worse. Chayton's expression darkened. There are always raids when it is convenient. Always Apaches to blame when fear is needed. You think it wasn't real? Oh, it was real, he said quietly. But who did it? Renegades, or white men dressed as Apache. It happens more than people admit. Dead families can't tell the truth. Tahu listened as Clara finished. He nodded once. The Whitman man shows wisdom. Neutrality is sometimes all we can ask. It's not enough, Chayton said, anger roughening his voice. A lawyer who might come. Votes 2 years away. Barrett won't give us that time. Then we make our own time, Tahu replied calmly. He turned to Clara. Daughter, among your father's things, are there papers proving this land is yours? Yes. The deed. The claim papers. Why? Because a law is stronger when written, Tahu said. If this sheriff wants legal, we give him legal. My son knows the white man's law. He studied it at the agency school before they closed it. Chayton blinked. That was years ago. Knowledge does not expire, Tahu said. Clara brought out Silas Boone's document box. They spent the afternoon sorting papers. Chayton's education ran deeper than she'd known. He read the dense language with ease, marking notes in her pen, turning fear into lines of ink and possibility. Your claim is solid, Chayton said at last. And there's nothing in territorial law that forbids giving shelter to travelers, Indian or otherwise. Sheriff Cole Barrett is overstepping his authority. But who will stand up and tell him that? Clara Boone asked. We will, Chayton answered simply. With papers and witnesses. We make it public, official. We force him into daylight, not shadows. That evening, as they shared a quiet meal that might be their last in peace, Tahu told another story. This one was about a mouse who stood up to an eagle using wit instead of strength. The eagle could crush the mouse, he said. But the mouse knew something the eagle did not. That all the smaller creatures were watching. If one showed courage, others might follow. And many mice together can defeat one eagle. So the mice win? Clara asked. Tahu smiled. Stories end how we choose to end them. That is the power of being human. We can change the story. Later, as Clara prepared for bed, Chayton stopped her with a gentle hand on her arm. Whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know something, he said, struggling for words. These days with you, they've been like waking after a long sleep. My father says I've been dead inside since my wife died. But here, with you, I feel alive again. Clara's throat tightened. Let me finish, he said softly. If Barrett comes tomorrow and things turn bad, promise me something. Take my father and run. The North Trail? No. Clara placed her fingers over his lips. We stand together, or not at all. That's not negotiable. He caught her hand, holding it against his face. Stubborn woman. Stubborn man, she replied. were evenly matched. For a moment, the air between them hummed with possibility. Then Tahu coughed gently, breaking the spell, and they stepped apart. That night, Clara lay awake planning. Mei Lin had been right. Faith was her weapon. Faith that right could prevail, that the town's conscience wasn't entirely dead, that love could stand against hate. She thought of the Pemberton family, murdered in their home, of the fear that tragedy would stir, of the anger Barrett would exploit. But she also thought of Mei Lin's courage, of Hank Whitman's reluctant neutrality, of Eli Turner's quiet kindness with supplies. Not everyone in Cedar Ridge had surrendered to Barrett's idea of justice. The second day of their 3-day reprieve was coming. Time slipped through her fingers like water. Yet as sleep finally took her, Clara felt an unexpected calm. Whatever came, she would not face it alone. An old Apache storyteller and his warrior son had changed her life. Now it was time to see how the story would end. Tahu's medallion lay warm against her skin, a reminder of another woman who had chosen freedom over safety. Outside, an owl called, and the wind moved through the pines. The mountain kept its ancient watch, indifferent yet steady. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. But tonight, in a small cabin high in the Colorado mountains, 3 souls had forged their own meaning of family, of home, of belonging. And that, Clara thought as sleep claimed her, was worth any price Barrett and his mob might demand. The story was still being written, and Clara Boone, who had been alone for so long, finally understood that the strongest stories are written together, with courage, faith, and a love that blooms in the most unlikely places, like a flower breaking through snow, fragile, and all the more beautiful because of it. The second day arrived beneath an ominous red sunrise, staining the snow like blood. Clara woke to find Chayton already outside, scanning the tree line with grim focus. Tahu sat at the table, calmly writing on the paper she had given him. "What are you writing?" she asked, pouring coffee with hands that trembled. "Truth," the old man replied. "My testimony, who we are, why we left the agency, what has happened here. Truth is a weapon too, if used correctly." Before she could answer, Chayton burst through the door. "Riders coming, a lot of them." Clara's heart dropped. It was only the second day. Barrett had promised 3, but promises meant nothing to men like him. "How many?" Tahu asked, still writing. 15, maybe 20. Barrett's leading them." Chayton reached for his rifle, movements swift and precise. "They're coming slow, making sure we see them." The eagle was circling, and the mice were ready. Clara Boone looked out through the cabin window. The posse was impossible to miss now, fanning out across the white slope in a long, deliberate line. She recognized many faces. Some she had expected, like Caleb Drayton and Luke Drayton, but others tightened her chest with surprise. There was Eli Turner from the general store, young Jesse Cole, barely more than a boy, even Pastor Williams, though he lingered well behind the others, as if distance might absolve him. "So much for Christian charity," Clara murmured. "Fear turns decent men into cowards," Tahu said quietly. He finished writing, folded the paper with care, and placed it in her hands. "Keep this safe, daughter, no matter what happens." The riders halted just beyond rifle range. Sheriff Cole Barrett rode forward alone, his badge flashing coldly in the morning sun. He looked sober today, which somehow made him more dangerous. "Clara Boone," his voice carried clean across the snow. "By the authority vested in me as sheriff of this county, I am here to arrest the Apache fugitives you are harboring. Send them out now, and no harm will come to you." Clara stepped onto the porch, grateful for the solid log wall at her back. You said 3 days, Sheriff. It's only been 2. That was before we heard from Fort Apache. Barrett shot back. These Indians are wanted for theft, assault on an agency official, and inciting rebellion. They are dangerous criminals, and you're protecting them. Lies, Chayton said from behind her, his voice low and steady. We stole nothing, hurt no one. Speaking truth is not rebellion. Then come out and say that to a judge, Barrett snapped. If you're innocent, you've got nothing to fear from the law. Tahu appeared in the doorway, straight-backed despite his weakness. Your law? He asked, his voice carrying unexpected strength. The law that starves women and children, that steals our land, our language, our names. That law I do not recognize. A ripple passed through the line of riders. Saddles creaked as men shifted uneasily. You hear that? Barrett turned to his posse. Defiance, rejection of American authority. And this woman stands with them against her own people. I stand with justice, Clara said clearly. With humanity. If that puts me against you, Sheriff, then maybe you should ask yourself which side you're really on. Barrett sneered. Brave words. Let's see how brave you are when... Sheriff Barrett! A new voice cut in. Heads turned as a rider galloped up from the direction of town. Clara recognized Hank Whitman before he even pulled up hard on the reins. Barrett's jaw tightened. What are you doing here, Whitman? Stopping a mistake, Hank said, breathless. There's a U.S. Marshal riding in from Denver. Got word this morning. He's coming to investigate complaints about Fort Apache agency. He gestured toward Chayton and Tahu. These men aren't criminals. They're witnesses. The posse stirred again. A U.S. Marshal outranked any county sheriff. That's convenient, Barrett said coldly. Who sent for a marshal? Mei Lin's lawyer cousin, Hank replied. Turns out he's got friends in high places. The marshal will be here by nightfall. Hope flared in Clara's chest, but Barrett wasn't finished. Marshal or not, these Indians are trespassing on white land. That's still a crime. Actually, it isn't, another voice said. Eli Turner urged his horse forward, face pale but determined. I checked the territorial statutes last night. Clara Boone owns this land outright. She can host whoever she chooses. Barrett's glare burned. You taking their side now, Turner? I'm taking the law's side, Eli answered. The real law, not whatever you invent when it suits you. Murmurs spread. Clara saw doubt flicker across faces that had arrived hungry for certainty. You're all fools, Barrett snarled. These savages killed the Pemberton family. No, Pastor Williams said quietly, riding forward at last. His thin face was drawn. They couldn't have. Records placed them at the agency 4 days before the raid. The air shifted. Clara felt it, the subtle turning of the tide. Men who had come for simple violence were being forced to face complicated truth. Enough talk, Caleb Drayton barked, spurring his horse ahead. We came here to do a job. The eagle was circling, but the mice were no longer silent. Are we really going to let a woman and 2 Indians make fools of us? Caleb Drayton shouted. We came here to uphold the law. To uphold the law, Hank Whitman shot back sharply, not to turn into a lynch mob. Same thing sometimes, Luke Drayton growled. No, Tahu said, stepping fully onto the porch. His voice was calm, but it carried. It is never the same thing. I have lived long enough to see both. True justice builds a people. Mob rule destroys them. Pretty speech from a savage, Caleb sneered. I am Apache, Tahu replied, unflinching. Because I am a father, a grandfather, a keeper of stories. I have loved, lost, and endured. Tell me, what are you besides a man borrowing another man's hatred? Caleb's face burned red. His hand twitched toward his gun. Draw it, Jack. Eli Turner snapped, his voice cracking like a rifle shot. And you'll answer to a federal marshal for it. The air went tight as wire. Chayton shifted beside Clara Boone, every muscle ready. Violence hovered, waiting for permission. Then Jesse Cole surprised them all. I ain't shooting nobody's grandfather, he said loudly, turning his horse. This ain't what I signed up for. He rode off without looking back. The break was contagious. Another man followed, then another. The line thinned fast until only the hardcore remained. Sheriff Cole Barrett, Caleb Drayton, Luke Drayton, and a handful of others. Cowards, Barrett bellowed after the retreating riders. You'll regret this. The only regret here, Pastor Williams said quietly, is my own silence. He looked straight at Clara. Agnes Whitlow has poisoned this town against you for years, and I said nothing. That ends today. I'm sorry. He turned his horse and rode away. Barrett stood seething, his force now less than a third of what it had been. This isn't over, he said coldly. Marshal or no marshal, you can't watch your backs forever. Is that a threat, Sheriff? Hank asked mildly. In front of witnesses? Barrett's jaw worked. Pride battled survival, and survival won. We're leaving, he snarled. But this isn't finished. The remnants of the posse turned away. Caleb spat in the snow before following. Clara stayed on the porch until they disappeared. Then her knees weakened. Chayton caught her arm instantly. You did well, he said quietly. Very well. We all did, Clara replied, her voice shaking. But Barrett's right. This isn't over. No, Tahu agreed. But the story has changed. The small one showed courage, and others noticed. This is how avalanches begin, one stone moving. Hank remained behind. He dismounted and approached, hat in hand. Miss Boone, I owe you an apology. I should have stood up sooner. You stood up when it mattered, Clara said. That takes courage. Takes shame, too, Hank admitted. Sarah Whitman gave me hell last night. Said she'd never forgive me if I let Barrett railroad innocent people. He glanced at Chayton and Tahu. I don't know you men, but Clara Boone's a good judge of character. That's enough for me. Your wife is wise, Tahu said gravely. Listen to her. Hank smiled faintly. 23 years married. Learned that lesson. Then his face hardened. The marshal is coming. By sunset. But Barrett won't quit easy. Too much pride. And greed, Clara added. He's always wanted this land. Then we stay ready, Chayton said. Hank rode off, promising to keep watch in town. The cabin felt unnaturally quiet after the shouting. Clara poured fresh coffee, hands still trembling. I thought they were going to shoot, she admitted. So did I, Chayton said. But you stood your ground. That changed everything. We stood our ground, Clara corrected. Tahu smiled, the lines of his face deep and proud. See how the story has shifted, Tahu said quietly. This morning we were 3 people standing alone against many. Now we have allies. The Morrison man, the shopkeeper, even the holy man found his conscience. Sheriff Cole Barrett still has men, Clara Boone said. Violent men, Chayton agreed, but fewer than before. And now they know others are watching. Violence is easiest in darkness. Light makes cowards hesitate. They spent the afternoon preparing for the marshal's arrival. Tahu's written testimony was joined by Clara's account and Chayton's careful records of their expulsion from the agency. They had truth on their side, but would truth be enough? As the sun slid toward the mountains, painting the sky in amber and rose, hoofbeats sounded again. Clara's heart jumped, but Chayton, watching from the window, relaxed. One rider, alone, federal badge. The marshal was younger than Clara expected, sharp-eyed with a neat mustache. "James McBride," he said, accepting her coffee with relief. "Cold ride from Denver. Now, tell me what's been happening." They told him everything. The storm, the shelter, Barrett's threats, the attempted arrest that morning. McBride listened without interruption, jotting notes. When they finished, he sat back. "I've been investigating the Apache agency for months," he said. "Stolen supplies, cut rations, Indians starving while beef gets sold off to ranchers. These men," he nodded to Chayton and Tahu, "are wanted as witnesses. Their testimony could clean out that mess." "You'll protect them?" Clara asked. "I'll do better," McBride replied. "I'll deputize them as federal witnesses. Anyone who threatens them threatens the United States government." His smile was thin. "Even Sheriff Barrett won't pick that fight." "You don't know Barrett," Chayton said darkly. "I know his type," McBride answered. "Bullies who use a badge to settle personal scores. There are going to be changes in Cedar Ridge, starting with a close look at the sheriff. As if summoned, Sheriff Cole Barrett appeared at the edge of the clearing, riding forward alone, hands visible. "Marshal McBride," he called. "Heard you were here." "Sheriff Barrett," McBride said evenly. "I understand there's been trouble." "Just doing my job," Barrett said, forcing calm. "These Indians were off the reservation without papers. These men are federal witnesses in my custody," McBride replied coolly. "Any interference is a federal crime. Are we clear?" Barrett's jaw worked. "Clear. I'll be staying in town a few days," McBride added pleasantly, "looking into matters. I trust you'll cooperate." Barrett nodded stiffly and rode away. "He won't forget this," Chayton said. "Neither will I," McBride replied. "Men like Barrett rely on isolation, on victims having nowhere to turn. That's changed." He looked at Clara. "You showed real courage. Not many would stand up to a corrupt sheriff and a mob." "I had help," Clara said, glancing at Chayton and Tahu. "I wasn't alone." "No," Tahu said softly. "None of us are. Separation is the lie. Connection is the truth." As darkness fell, McBride headed for town, promising to return in the morning for formal statements. The crisis had passed, at least for now. Barrett was checked, his authority challenged. But as Clara cooked supper, she knew victories like this were fragile. Barrett's kind did not accept defeat easily. He would look for another opening. "You're worried," Chayton said, drying dishes beside her. "Barrett's still out there," Clara replied. "Still dangerous." "But no longer unopposed," Chayton said. "Today proved there are good people in Cedar Ridge. They just needed someone to remind them of their courage." "Is that really what I did?" Chayton murmured, his fingers brushing Clara Boone's cheek. "You stepped between us and 20 armed men. You faced hatred without flinching, with dignity." He searched her eyes. "Yes. You reminded them what courage looks like. You reminded me, too, of courage, of many things. That goodness still exists in this world, that kindness survives, that a heart can mend even after deep loss." His thumb traced her cheekbone, slow and reverent. "My wife would have liked you. She carried the same spirit, fierce and gentle, both at once." It was the first time he had spoken of her so plainly. Clara covered his hand with hers. "Tell me about her." So he did quietly. He spoke of a young woman who laughed easily, who tracked deer better than most men, who died shielding children during the forced march to the reservation. Clara listened, knowing this was a gift, the sharing of a sacred memory. "She sounds extraordinary," Clara said when he finished. "She was," Chayton replied. "But she's gone, and I can't live in yesterday forever. My father is right. I've been hollow for too long." He met Clara's gaze. "You brought me back. Whatever comes next, I need you to know that." Before Clara could answer, Tahu spoke from his chair. "The Marshal offers protection, but also duty. We must go to Denver. Testify about the agency. Weeks, perhaps months. The weight of it settled between them. They would have to leave. Just when? "Then I'll go with you," Clara said, sudden and certain. Both men looked at her, startled. "This land will still be here when we return," she went on, gaining strength. "And someone should make sure you're treated fairly in Denver. Besides," a small smile, "I've hidden on this mountain for 7 years. Maybe it's time I saw more of the world." "The city is not kind to Apache," Tahu warned, "nor to women who stand beside them." "Then we stand together," Clara said firmly. "That's what we do now." Tahu's weathered face softened into a genuine smile. "The story keeps changing," he said. "I like the direction." That night, as they planned the journey to Denver, Clara felt fear braided with exhilaration. The quiet, contained life she had built was ending. In its place, something larger was taking shape. A life with purpose, with connection, with a fragile possibility of love. In town, Sheriff Cole Barrett brooded, his power diminished, but his resentment intact. The Marshal investigated. The townsfolk whispered, and the mountains watched, unmoved. Change was coming to Cedar Ridge, born from kindness in a storm and the courage to defend what was right. Clara touched the medallion beneath her shirt, once worn by Noma, a woman who chose freedom over safety, love over convention. Now Clara faced the same choice, and like that woman before her, she chose the harder road, the uncertain one, leading away from isolation and toward connection. The second day ended. The third would soon begin. Morning came gray and still, the kind of quiet that promises either peace or calamity. Clara woke early, a restless feeling tugging at her. She went to the window and saw Tahu on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, facing east. His lips moved in morning prayers. But his posture was different, a stillness deeper than meditation. She stepped outside softly, but he spoke without turning. "The sun rises on my last morning, daughter." "Don't say that," Clara said, ice forming in her chest. "You're stronger. The Marshal will take us to Denver. There are good doctors there." "Doctors cannot mend what is complete," Tahu said gently. "I have lived my seasons, spring of childhood, summer of strength, autumn of wisdom. Now comes winter, and I am content." "No," Clara said, kneeling beside him, taking his weathered hand. "We need you." "My son needs to release me," Tahu corrected softly. "As I once had to release his mother. This is the order of things." Tahu turned toward her, his gaze clear, calm, complete. "But first, there are words that must be spoken. Will you bring my son and the coffee an old man deserves on his final morning?" Clara Boone wanted to protest, to deny what she saw in his face. Yet there was dignity in his certainty that demanded honor. She woke Chaitan gently, whispering only that his father was asking for him. The alarm in his eyes told her he felt it too. They sat together on the porch, the three of them. As the sun climbed, Tahu drank his coffee slowly, savoring each sip. "I have been thinking," he said, "about stories and how they end. The story of Tahu is nearly finished, but the story of my son and the brave woman who opened her door to strangers, that story is just beginning." "Father," Chaitan said, his voice rough, "you speak like a man who knows his hour." Tahu smiled. "Yes, my son, because I do. I felt it in the night, the threads loosening that bind spirit to flesh. It is not something to fear. It is completion." He reached into his pouch and drew out a small leather bundle. "This was meant to be buried with me, but now I believe it should continue on." He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a finely worked silver ring set with turquoise. "This was your mother Noma's wedding ring. Before her final walk, she placed it in my hand and told me to give it to you when you were ready to love again." Chaitan's hands trembled as he took it. "Father, you are ready," Tahu said firmly. "I have watched how you look at one another when you think no one sees, how you move together, like dancers hearing the same music. Your mother would be glad." He turned to Clara. "And you, daughter of my heart, you gave us more than shelter. You gave us home, family, a place to belong in our last days together." From his pouch, he took a second gift, a small medicine bag, intricately beaded. "This holds the earth of my birthplace, the sacred mountains where Apache boys become men. Carry it wherever you go. You carry our land with you. You are family now, always." Clara accepted the bag, tears spilling freely. "Tahu, please, fight this. We have so much planned." "Plans are for the living," he said gently. "I have another journey now. But first, one more story. Will you listen?" They nodded, unable to speak. Tahu leaned back, his voice settling into the rhythm of the old storytellers. "Long ago, when the world was young, Eagle asked Creator for eternal life. Creator smiled and said, 'You may live forever, but you must never land. You must fly always. Never rest, never touch the earth again.' Eagle, proud and strong, agreed. For many years he flew, watching the world below. He saw Mouse born, live, die, and be born again through his children. He watched the seasons turn, mountains rise and wear away, rivers change their paths. After 1,000 years, Eagle grew weary. Eternal life became a burden, and he begged Creator for release. Creator said, 'I will give you a choice. Fly forever, or land one final time. Rest your wings and join the great circle of life and death.' Eagle chose to land, and in that moment, feeling the solid earth beneath him, knowing rest at last, he understood that Mouse had always been wiser. Life is beautiful because it ends. Love is powerful because it is precious." Tahu's breathing grew heavier as he spoke, yet his voice stayed steady. "I choose to land, my children. It is time." "Father," Chaitan whispered, kneeling beside him, "let me take you inside." "I would see one more fire in the hearth," Tahu said softly. They helped him to the chair by the fireplace. Clara built the fire bright and warm. Tahu smiled, watching the flames dance. "In the old days," he said, "when an elder knew the hour was near, the people gathered to hear his final words, words carried through generations." He looked at them, love plain in his eyes. "Mine are simple. Love without fear. Stand for truth. Remember that we are all related. People, creatures, all things. Separation is an illusion, he whispered. Connection is real. His eyes closed. His breath thinned. Chayton held one hand. Clara held the other. They sat in sacred silence as the morning deepened around them. Sing for me, Tahu murmured. The traveling song, so I know the way. Chayton began to sing in Apache, his voice breaking yet steadying as it went on. The melody was ancient and haunting. Clara did not know the words, but she felt their purpose, a guide for a spirit preparing to journey. As the song faded, Tahu opened his eyes one last time. My wife waits, he said, wonder softening his voice. She is young again, laughing. The mountains are green, the water is sweet. I go now. With a final, gentle breath, like wind slipping through pine needles, Tahu's spirit departed. His body remained, but the part of him that told stories, shaped string figures, and called Clara Boone daughter had gone on. Chayton made a sound torn straight from grief, pressing his face to his father's still hand. Clara wrapped her arms around him, and they mourned together. Not Apache and white, not man and woman, but two souls who had lost someone irreplaceable. Time moved without markers. The fire sank to embers. At last, Chayton lifted his head, eyes wet but steady. He would not want long mourning, he said. In our way, we honor the journey forward, not the leaving behind. What should we do? Clara asked softly. He should rest where he can see the mountains, Chayton said, where the sun can warm him and the stars can keep watch. There's a hill above the cabin, Clara replied. It faces east toward the sunrise. In spring, wildflowers cover it. He would have liked that. They wrapped Tahu in the finest blanket, the one patterned with wedding rings sewn long ago by Edna Boone. It felt right. A joining of traditions, a joining of families. Chayton carried his father with a strength that felt both physical and spiritual, while Clara led them to the hilltop. The ground was frozen hard, but they worked side by side with pickaxe and shovel. As they labored, Chayton told stories of the day his father faced a grizzly with nothing but a walking stick, of how he made children laugh with shadow puppets, of his gift for finding water where none seemed possible. When the grave was ready, they lowered Tahu gently, facing east as custom required. Chayton placed the sacred items, a piece of turquoise, an eagle feather, a pinch of corn pollen. Clara added her own offering, a sprig of dried wildflowers pressed the previous summer, a promise of the beauty that would surround him when spring returned. In our way, Chayton said, voice steady now. We do not speak the names of those who have journeyed on. We remember their teachings, their love, their stories. These live forever. He lifted a handful of earth. From the earth we come, to the earth we return. The circle is complete. They filled the grave together, then built a cairn of stones. When it was done, they stood in silence. The wind gentle, the mountains eternal witnesses. He was right, Clara said at last, about the story changing. A week ago I was alone, bitter, existing but not living. Then you came, and everything shifted. He changed it, Chayton said. You changed it, Clara replied. Chayton shook his head. By opening your door, by choosing kindness over fear. He saw that at once. That's why he trusted you, why he called you daughter. They returned to the cabin as the sun reached its height. The rooms felt different without Tahu, emptier, yet fuller too, as if his spirit had expanded to fill every corner with memory. Marshal McBride arrived that afternoon and sensed the change immediately. I'm sorry for your loss, he said simply, a man of quiet dignity. He was, Chayton agreed, and he would want us to move with purpose, not stop in grief. They gave their statements, signed papers, and made plans for Denver. Beneath the work, sorrow moved like an underground river, surfacing when Clara set 3 plates at supper, when Chayton reached for string to show his father a new pattern. That evening, seated by the fire in chairs forever marked by memory, Chayton spoke of what lay ahead. The marshal says the testimony could take weeks. After that, I don't know where I'll go. The reservation holds only bad memories. Mexico is possible. He looked at Clara. My father saw something I was afraid to see, afraid even to hope. Clara's heart quickened. What did he see? Chayton moved closer, kneeling beside her, taking her hands. He saw that home is not a place, but a person. He saw you and me. He searched for words and let them go. Clara, I have nothing to offer but myself. No land, no wealth, no certainty. But if you would have me, yes, Clara said, before he could finish. Yes to all of it. To uncertainty, to hardship, to whatever comes. Yes to you. To us. To the future your father saw. Chayton drew out his mother Noma's ring, turquoise catching the firelight. This ring has known a love that outlived death. Would you wear it? Would you be my wife? Clara extended her hand, steady despite the tears. The ring fit as if it had been waiting for her all along. Your father knew, she whispered, from the beginning. He always knew the things others missed, Chayton said softly. Chayton nodded, rising to draw her into his arms. My father used to say the spirits guided us to your door, he murmured. I think he was right. They held each other while the fire breathed and the night gathered close. Tomorrow would bring the road to Denver, the long fight for justice, and the harder work of building a life in a world slow to accept them. But tonight, inside the cabin where strangers had become family, where kindness had outlasted hatred, where love had taken root in winter's heart, they allowed themselves to be still. Above them, on the hill, Tahu rested beneath stone and earth and sky. Yet his true monument lived below, in 2 people who had found one another across every divide, who would carry his stories forward, who would prove that love could stand against fear. The ring on Clara Boone's finger caught the firelight as she and Chayton planned a future that honored what had been and welcomed what was coming. Outside, snow began to fall again. Soft this time, almost a benediction over the grave of a man who had changed everything by asking for shelter in a storm. By the old way, the dead live on in the memory and the deeds of those who loved them. By that measure, Tahu was more alive than ever. In the courage Clara had discovered, in the mending of his son's heart, in the love that would carry his grandchildren into a new world. The story he began was far from finished. In truth, it was only beginning. Spring came early to the mountains that year, loosening winter's grip and revealing wildflowers that kept their promise around Tahu's resting place. Clara stood on the familiar hill, changed in every way. Her hair, once pinned tight, fell loose now, feathers woven through it, a gift from Apache women she'd met in Denver. Her dress remained proper, but beadwork brightened the cuffs and collar. Chayton's patient work during long winter evenings. He would have loved this, Clara said softly, gazing at the blue columbines and Indian paintbrush spilling across the slope. He does love it, Chayton replied gently, slipping an arm around her waist. In our way, those who journey on see through our eyes, feel through our hearts. 6 months had passed since they laid Tahu to rest. 6 months of testimony in Denver, of headlines naming corruption at the Fort Apache agency, of small victories that led to larger change. The agent who expelled Chayton and his father now sat in a federal cell. Food and supplies finally reached the reservation, as they should have years earlier. It wasn't everything, but it was a beginning. For Clara and Chayton, those months also brought marriage, sealed in Apache tradition and under American law. The ceremony in Denver was modest. Marshal McBride stood as witness. May Lynn traveled from Cedar Ridge to stand beside Clara. Even Hank Whitman and Sarah Whitman came, bearing a gift and news from home. Now they were back. "Are you ready?" Chayton asked as they headed down toward the cabin. Clara touched the medicine bag at her throat. Earth from Tahu's birthplace, steady and warm. As ready as anyone can be to face their past. The ride into town felt both familiar and strange. The same mountains watched them pass, the same trees lined the trail. But Clara rode beside her husband. How she loved that word. No longer alone, no longer afraid. They first met Jesse Cole, who nearly dropped the supplies he was loading when he saw them. "Miss Dawson, Mrs. He faltered, unsure. "Mrs. Freeman," Clara supplied, using the American name Chayton had taken for the courts, though she knew who he truly was. "Hello, Jesse. How's the town?" "Different," Jesse said, finding his voice. "Sheriff Barrett's gone. The marshal saw to that. We've got a new sheriff now. Cooper, out of Colorado Springs. Folks say he's fair." He glanced at Chayton. "Welcome back, sir." Chayton nodded once. "Thank you." As they moved on, Clara felt eyes follow them. Some wary, some curious, some unexpectedly warm. May Lynn appeared in her doorway, smile bright as daylight. "You came back. I told everyone. Clara too smart to stay away forever. Come, T. You tell me about Denver." Before they could answer, a familiar figure stepped from the general store. Agnes Whitlow stood on the boardwalk, older, somehow smaller, her scowl deepening. "So it's true," Agnes called. "Clara Boone married a savage. Your poor parents must be spinning in their graves." Chayton stiffened, but Clara laid a calming hand on his arm and dismounted. She walked straight to Agnes, chin high. "My parents," Clara said clearly, "taught me to judge by actions, not blood. They taught me that kindness matters more than conformity, and that love crosses boundaries. I think they would be proud that I finally learned those lessons." "Proud?" Agnes snapped. "Proud you degraded yourself? That you turned your back on your own kind?" Clara didn't raise her voice. "I didn't turn my back on anyone. I turned my face toward truth. My kind," Clara Boone said softly, then steadied her voice. "Are those who choose love over hate, courage over cowardice, truth over comfortable lies. If that isn't your kind, Agnes Whitlow, then you're right. I have turned my back on it. And I thank God every day for the storm that gave me the strength to do so." A small crowd had gathered, drawn by the clash. Clara caught sight of Eli Turner in his store doorway, Pastor Williams near the church, faces she had known all her life. This was the moment she had both feared and awaited. "You all know me," she said, projecting so everyone could hear. "I've lived among you my whole life. I've been whispered about, pitied, scorned, for the crime of being different. For 7 years I accepted that treatment. I hid on my mountain. I believed I deserved isolation." She paused, letting the truth settle. Then 2 men came seeking shelter from a storm, and I learned something. The savage ones were not those who knocked on my door. The savage ones were those who came after, at night, with guns and threats. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The savage ones were not the people who spoke of family, stories, and connection. Clara continued. They were the ones who preached division and fed on fear. I stand before you changed, yes, but changed for the better. And I stand with my husband, proud of who we are together. A harsh voice cut through the murmurs. Caleb Drayton shoved forward, his hand resting on his gun. Pretty speech. But just because Sheriff Cole Barrett is gone doesn't mean we have to tolerate Indian lovers in our town. Actually, a calm voice said, carrying authority, you do. A tall man with a badge stepped into view. Cooper, he said. New sheriff, and in my town, every law-abiding citizen is welcome, no matter who they love or where they come from. Caleb's face darkened. You taking their side? I'm taking the law's side. Sheriff Cooper replied evenly. And the law says these folks have every right to be here. Anyone who disagrees can discuss it with me. Inside my jail. The threat was polite. It was also unmistakable. Caleb muttered something foul and backed away, slinking off. Sheriff Cooper tipped his hat. Mrs. Freeman, Mr. Freeman, welcome home. I've heard about the work you did in Denver. It takes courage to stand up to corruption. It takes more to stand up to neighbors. It does, Clara said, glancing toward Agnes. But sometimes it's what's needed. Pastor Williams stepped forward then, thin face earnest. Mrs. Freeman is right. I've done a great deal of soul-searching these past months. I read my Bible with new eyes. And you know what I found. Love, over and over. Love thy neighbor. It doesn't say only if they look like you. He extended his hand to Chayton. I owe you an apology, sir. I let fear override faith. I hope you'll forgive me. Chayton studied him for a moment, then took his hand. Forgiveness is the beginning of healing. My father taught me that. Your father was a wise man, William said quietly. I wish I'd known him. One by one, others approached. Not everyone. Agnes huffed away, and a few followed. But Eli Turner offered them credit at the store. Widow Carson shyly pressed a jar of preserves into Clara's hands, welcoming her home. Even some who had ridden with Barrett's posse mumbled apologies or tipped their hats. As the crowd thinned, May Lynn insisted they come for tea in her small kitchen behind the laundry. She peppered them with questions about Denver, the trial, their plans. We're going to work the land, Clara explained. Chayton has ideas. Breeding horses, Apache ponies crossed with American stock. Strong, smart, adaptable, like your children will be, May Lynn said with a knowing smile. Clara blushed. They hadn't told anyone yet, but the wise woman missed little. Children who will grow up free, Chayton said quietly. Not on a reservation, not hidden in shame. Free to be both Apache and American, whole. Good, May Lynn said, satisfied. A town needs children who see with both eyes, speak with both voices. Change comes slow, but it comes sure, generation by generation. They spent the rest of the day with those who welcomed them, avoiding those who did not. When the sun dipped toward the mountains, they returned to their cabin, home. Everything was as they had left it. And yet, like Clara herself, it felt transformed. Chayton's repairs gave the walls new strength. The additions they'd planned in Denver, a larger room for the children to come, a workshop for his leather work, would make it truly theirs. No regrets. Chayton stood with Clara Boone on the porch, both of them looking out over the land that had slowly become theirs. I wish my father could have lived to see this, Chayton said at last. I wish the town accepted us without reservation. I wish the world were different in 100 ways. He shook his head. But regret? No. How could I regret the road that led me to you? They went back inside and lit the fire in the hearth where Tahu had spent his final hours. Clara fixed supper while Chaitin worked leather at the table, shaping a new bridle. The quiet of shared work settled around them, easy and earned. I've been thinking, Chaitin said as they ate, about my father's stories. They shouldn't disappear. You want to teach them, Clara said. Yes, to our children, but not only to them, to anyone who will listen. Apache children who are losing their heritage, white children who were never taught it, stories that cross borders. Clara reached across the table and laced her fingers with his. He would love that. Stories living on, changing hearts, one telling at a time. That night, lying together in the bed they had shared as husband and wife for 6 months now, Clara traced the path that had brought them here. 1 week, only one, from the knock on her door to Tahu's passing. 1 week that had remade her life. What are you thinking? Chaitin asked, drawing her closer. About storms and blessings, she said softly. About how the worst night of that blizzard became the best night of my life. About how saying yes to shelter led to every other yes. Yes to love, Chaitin murmured into her hair. Yes to courage, she answered. Yes to us. And yes to tomorrow, Clara said, guiding his hand to the gentle swell of her belly where their child grew. And all the tomorrows after. Outside, spring wind moved through the pines. An owl called from the hill above. Wildflowers nodded in starlight over a grave marked by stone and care. Inside the cabin where strangers had become family, 2 people who had once been alone found themselves part of something larger. A story that crossed cultures and defied old lines. A love that bridged worlds. The next morning, a gift waited on the doorstep. A cradle, beautifully carved. A note lay inside. For the new one coming. From neighbors learning to see better. S. and A. Whitman. Clara held the note with unsteady hands. Change really is coming. My father always said it would, Chaitin replied. He said hate shouts, but love endures. In the end, connection outlasts division. They spent the day working the land, planning for horses, for children, for a future that would have seemed impossible months earlier. At sunset, they climbed the hill to Tahu's resting place, bringing fresh flowers and news. We're home, Father, Chaitin said to the stones and sky. The story you believed in is coming true, and our children will know who you were, what you taught us. Clara added her own words, speaking to the man who had called her daughter. Thank you for seeing who I could be before I did, for trusting me with your son, for teaching me that family isn't blood, it's choice. We choose each other, every day. They walked back down the hill hand in hand, the mountains washed in gold and rose. Clara thought of the townspeople who had surprised her with welcome, and of those still learning, of children who would grow up in a world just a little wider than before. It wasn't a perfect ending. There would be challenges. There would always be those like Agnes Whitlow, clinging to bitterness. But it was a true ending, and more than that, a beginning. The storm that had brought Chaitin and Tahu to her door had passed. Its gifts remained. Love, family, purpose, and the courage to stand for what was right. That night, as Chaitin told one of his father's stories to the child growing within her, Clara touched Tahu's medallion and whispered a prayer of thanks. She had lived alone for years, until a giant Apache and his aging father asked, "Can we stay one night?" One night had become a lifetime, and a lifetime forever. Cradled in her husband's arms, Clara Boone drifted towards sleep, knowing, without doubt, that this life was exactly as long and as full as she wanted it to be. The mountains kept their ancient vigil beyond the window. Seasons would turn, children would be born, stories would be told and retold. In the small cabin where love had outlasted fear, the future no longer felt distant or, finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blaze the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso legal/disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice, imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process. But every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work. Imagined. It was being written every day in acts of courage, in quiet kindness, in the simple human truth that people are far more alike than they are different. All of them, in the end, were seeking the same shelter from life's storms. The story Tahu had seen, once only a fragile possibility, had become real. It lived in the daily choices of two people who had found each other across every divide and decided that love was worth any price the world might demand. Somewhere beyond sight, where spirits walk and memory never fades, an old Apache storyteller smiled. He knew his greatest story, the one shaped by both his living and his leaving, would continue long after his final breath, carried forward in the lives he had changed. The mountains stood watch. The fire burned low. And in the quiet that followed, Clara slept in peace, certain of this truth. What began as one night of shelter had become a lifetime of belonging and a legacy that would endure.